Hey there, Peter Fayroian. Great fortune of being head of school at Greenhills School, here again, doing something that I have grown quite fond of doing. It's one of my favorite parts of my job right now, which is to have conversations with our alums who are out in the world doing really interesting, fascinating things that are helping other people. And we're just so proud of all of our alums, including our alum who is with us today. And she is Andrea Delbanco, and she is the editor-in-chief of Time for Kids, where, in addition to managing the editorial and the education staff at Time for Kids, she is vice president of Time Education. Prior to joining the Time for Kids team in 2005, Andrea worked at the New York Times and Time Out New York. She is a graduate of Brown University and, most importantly, graduated from Greenhills School in 1995, following her sister in 1991, Francesca. Andrea, welcome. It's nice to see you.
It's so nice to talk to you today. Thank you for having me.
You bet. So I have, which is great, I have questions from our journalism students. This year, you'll be pleased to know we have re-energized the alcove and our journalism class. And we asked them, what do you want to hear from Andrea? And so there are a series of questions I will ask you first. And if there's any time after that, I'll have my own.
Fantastic.
All right, so the first one, easy enough. Why did you pursue a career in journalism, and what prompted you to get involved with Time for Kids?
That's a really good question. Pursuing a career in journalism felt like a natural fit to me because I come from a family of writers. Basically, everybody in my immediate and many people in my extended family are writers of different sorts. Whether it's teaching writing at the graduate level, whether it's creative writing, writing books, or writing TV shows and screenplays, we've got that all covered in my family. So I went a little bit of a different direction, but still very much in the family business with writing for newspapers and magazines. And Time for Kids was an interesting progression. I started working at the New York Times, which is obviously mostly written for adults. And I found that I gravitated toward the stories that were of interest to their younger readers. Eventually, I left there to go to a magazine called Time Out New York, which was aimed at people who were in their 20s. And I really enjoyed that, but still felt like I was interested in reaching a younger age group. And there's sort of a lot of publications that reach adults to talk about the news, and many who reach, young adults and even teenagers. But there weren't a lot of people who were writing news and talking about current events for kids. And I felt really drawn to that because of that fact, because there aren't a million places who are doing it. It seemed like, well, this must be an interesting and exciting area to explore. And it felt really important to me. So I wound up at Time for Kids, and I have been there ever since, which is now 16 years. It's a very, very long time.
Wow. And which is a great segue to another question from our journalism students, which is, how is Time for Kids different from other traditional news outlets? And how are you finding it different from your experience with adult-centered news outlets?
It's very different in ways that aren't necessarily apparent to the reader. It's a very different business, which is to say that we don't put advertising in our magazine or on our website. We're very much committed to being a tool to teach kids news literacy skills, to teach them about authentic journalism and fact-based journalism, and to share stories that are all purely journalistic. So we don't have advertisements, and we don't have branded content, and we don't do work with partners that we don't disclose in the magazine. So the experience as being a reader isn't all that different, but from our vantage point, it is quite different. The other thing that really varies is that in our industry, print is still a really, really important part of what we do. We ship print magazines all around the country every week. We also have a digital version and a digital subscription. But for so many adult readers and consumers of news, people are just doing it all online and on their phones at this point. But Time for Kids starts with readers as young as 5 years old. And we're finding that teaching reading is going to continue to be really important for kids to have print paper in front of them. They do finger tracing to follow along. They're looking at all the photos and the design for context clues about what they're learning about. And so that's a really different part of the industry for us, and one that I'm really thrilled to be able to continue with, even as so many other publications are putting that aside.
Right. Interesting. I hadn't thought about that. I mean, we always hope that we look to our news outlets to be educated. But for adults, it's to be educated about what's going on in the world. Your mission is twofold, right? It's also it's education in and of itself, as well as educating about the world.
Right. We have a team at Time for Kids of curriculum experts and former teachers who put together a curriculum guide that goes with every story, basically every magazine that we do, so that if the magazine is coming into a classroom, the teacher has all the resources that they need to be able to use it that way. So the young reader experience is just of having a magazine that's written just for them at their age level. We do 5 different magazines every week between kindergarten and 8th grade. So they're leveled. Some of them for 2 grades. We have a kindergarten in 1st, and then 2nd grade stands alone. And then we have 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th and 8th editions. But the teachers, when they get the magazine, have background information. They have vocabulary and worksheets and quizzes and everything that they need to be able to use it right in their classroom without piling extra work onto their plate. So it's 2 parts of the business. It's really the editorial journalistic side and then also the education side.
Right. So another question. Sorry, I'm out here. We were talking earlier. I'm out here in the forum where my office
I love
is.
to see it.
We're going to be interrupted once in a while. So every once in a while, I'm on a Zoom. This is a funny thing about Zoom is oftentimes it looks like I'm just working on my computer. But so another question from our journalism kids. One of the things that they're doing is John Lund, our journalism instructor, has beat writers that are going out and getting information from people like me and around the school. We meet regularly, just, what's going on, you're my source. The question is, how do you go about sources, and where's your source material, and how do you get it for a kids magazine? So
part of being part of Time means that we have resources all over the world. We have reporters and editors and writers and something called stringers, people who do sort of research and information for us on the ground. And we have access to all of that, which is really different experience from being a standalone kids media company. So some of the stories that we do, we use stories that started in Time magazine, and we adapt them to be right for our readers' age reading level. And some of the stories we take reporting from Time stories and use that ourselves. So they might have facts and quotes and details, and our team might do the writing and work that in. And then some of the stories we just write ourselves if it's not being covered in any way in Time, or if it's of specific interest to readers our age, we'll do that ourselves. So we have a ton of resources for that. And that makes us really, really, really lucky. Within my specific team of people who are doing the writing that doesn't relate to what's being published in Time, people do have beats in different areas. So we have somebody who does sort of books and entertainment coverage, and we have somebody who is specifically responsible for the younger kids age group. But we generally have writers who are generalists, which is to say they can kind of cover every different topic that comes in front of them. And the reason for that is because, first of all, it's great training as a writer to be able to talk about different topics. But second of all, we really want to make sure that anyone who's reading these stories feels like they're accessible and understandable. So anyone with really specialized knowledge might write like it's for insiders. I think an example of that, a recent example of that, is we've been doing a lot of coverage of the coronavirus, as you might imagine. And we have the good fortune of working with Time's incredible health expert who really knows her stuff. But we find that when we're working with her or adapting her work, we really have to take a lot of steps back to make sure that we're giving all the basic information and groundwork to kids so that they don't feel like they're reading just science words and impossible concepts. So in our team, it really helps to have people who have to learn as they're reporting, as opposed to having all of this very specific, industry specific and topic specific knowledge.
Right, right. Anytime our alums or people come talk to our kids about their careers, our kids always have this question. It's a great question. What is your day like? Like, how do you, they're in trying to envision what it means to be a journalist. And so the question is, what is your day like, and what gets you excited every day about your work?
When I was at the New York Times and it was a daily newspaper, I had a really specific rhythm of every day. Now at Time for Kids, which is weekly, we have a really specific rhythm of every week, but it varies from day to day. So on Mondays, we usually sit down and talk about what the big news stories of the week are going to be and start kind of assigning stories and picking stories. And then we're working on them Tuesdays and Wednesday. On Thursday, which is the day when we close the magazine, it is a totally different kind of day. It's a scramble. It is today, in fact, where we're reviewing all of the stories and having everything doubly fact-checked and copy edited and moving things through production and imaging and getting everything ready to be sent off to print. Those magazines that close on Thursday are in classrooms on Monday. So people really get to hear actual breaking news from us, as opposed to many other educational publications that have to publish weeks or many times months in advance in order to get into classrooms around the country. We have the good fortune of having Times production plans and distribution services all around the country that we get to work with as well. But what it means is that Friday is a day for us to take a breath a little bit and think in the bigger picture and maybe look at some of our larger long-term feature assignments, as opposed to just the sprinting through the week to get to the close of the magazine. But we start every morning at 9:30 with a team meeting where we talk about both the news and also we talk about where things are in process. So we might have to remind a writer that they're on deadline for something, or ask the art department to show photos for a story or whatever it might be. And then the days, they just really depend on what we're working on. Some weeks are more straightforward than others. Last week was a really wild and exciting week with the approval of emergency use authorization of the vaccine for kids ages 5 to 11, which is a huge number of our readers, a huge percentage of our readers in kindergarten through 8th grade. So that had a lot of curveballs in it. We did a lot of stuff that we don't do on a typical week. And that was really exciting. One of my favorite parts of the job is working with our kid reporters. We have a team of 10 kids that we select through a national contest every year, and we work with them to mentor them throughout a school year on journalism and reporting and all of that. And the kids are always amazing. I'm so impressed by all of them, and they get to do really cool assignments. And it's one of my favorite parts of the job. Last week, we had a kid reporter interview Dr. Woodcock, who's the acting commissioner of the FDA. And we had a kid reporter also talk to the Surgeon General. And we had a kid reporter interview a kid who was part of a vaccine clinical trial to find out what that experience was like. This week, we have a kid reporter visiting and talking to Dr. Walensky, the head of the CDC in Atlanta. And we have somebody going to interview Janet Yellen, the Secretary of Treasury in DC. So they get to do all these exciting things. And I always wish that my full-time job could be just going with them for everything, because they get really cool stuff to do. But sometimes that's busier than others, and certain weeks that's a huge part of it, and certain weeks it's a little quieter.
Yeah, I'm sure you get some great feedback from these people too, after being interviewed by these wonderful young kids saying, "Oh God, I much prefer that."
Yes, that's right.
Normally being interviewed.
That's right. And you know what I love so much about this interview is that we have our kid reporters, when they're interviewing big sources like this, we get all 10 of them to submit questions that they're interested in to the one who has the assignment.
Oh, great.
As a result, we get more perspectives and more areas of curiosity and interest, right? So it's not just one kid's like, this is what I want to know from the director of the CDC. And so my job is usually getting together these questions from kids and then having an expert answer it. And it's really fun today to get to answer questions from kids. That's like a different challenge for me, and I'm loving it. Yeah, likewise here. Well, another really good question. You talked a little bit about COVID, but this question from one of our journalism students is, the past couple of years has been, something. So
COVID, yes. What is it? What have the challenges been for translating that and reporting that for a young audience? But what I'm more interested in is the question about the political climate in the past, couple of years. How have you managed that, and what kinds of decisions have gone into what you're going to produce in First Time for Kids?
A really, really astute and smart question. And the two are not unlinked, right? The coronavirus challenge and the political climate challenge. So first, I'll just say from a business standpoint, the coronavirus was a huge challenge for us and also a huge opportunity. But, we were delivering magazines into classrooms all over the country in March 2020. That was our business, and classrooms shut down. So we very quickly, within about 3 weeks, pivoted to having a fully digital experience for the magazine that we could have teachers integrate and, assign through their CMS or LMS or whatever they were using. But that was a huge challenge just to begin with, of reaching our audience in a totally new way and also attending to new needs. As you guys all know, it was a hugely disruptive moment for kids, and we really wanted to help attend to both their social and emotional needs and their teachers' needs for support and all of that. Covering the pandemic has been an interesting challenge for us. For many reasons, including we until recently didn't have our kid reporters out in the world doing reporting. So we all got used to Zoom interviews with experts. And that was a lot to learn, to teach and train young journalists how to talk to Dr. Fauci on a Zoom without freezing up and getting, too nervous or whatever.
Yeah.
But it's also been a challenge because there's so much tension and division around some of the facts that are around this virus. And that facts have been a huge challenge for us in management for a while now. And it's especially complicated in an educational setting for us because we very much deeply make it our mission to tell kids facts and let them form their own opinions. Part of teaching news literacy, that's the most important part, honestly, is presenting things in a really clear way that's not leading or misleading, and that's not meant to convince people, like it's not persuasive writing. And only recently, in my 16 years at Time for Kids, has it become a challenge to report on even some things that we all find to be facts, scientific based and data based, where it turns out that many people don't see it that way. Right. So it's been a really big challenge. And in the classroom setting, we also strive to never put teachers or parents, there are many family subscribers to Time for Kids as well outside of the classroom, in a position of teaching something that they either feel uncomfortable with or don't agree with, or whatever it might be. So we have a lot of considerations at our magazine that Time has different considerations of. And it has been a huge challenge. I think you can imagine that it's been topically relevant to many more stories than we ever thought it would be, right? So there were many years, a long time ago now, where when we would report on evolution, like a new fossil find or something, we would hear from people about that. Then there were also many years, and to date, still some, when we report on climate change, where we hear from people about that. But in the last several years, that topic list has just exploded.
Yeah.
So it's been a challenge. Another thing that's been really interesting is in terms of putting like social justice issues in the forefront. We find that's something that's incredibly important to teach kids about and to get kids interested in and give them a sense of agency and let them know that all of their small actions can add up to big changes. But there are definitely, people who don't find that welcome in a school setting. So it's a learning experience. It is every single day for me still. And we just have to really carefully make sure that we always feel we're doing what we feel is right and keeping to our mission, which is really teaching kids to respect journalism as opposed to getting news from a TikTok or from somebody's blog, like just to really highlight the difference between what are the sources that we use, how many times do we verify every fact, do we show information from different people as opposed to just one person's point of view, and all of that. We consider that with every story we do.
Yeah, no, for schools too, right? We've always talked about wanting, to teach critical thinking or encourage critical thinking and discernment of, sources now more than ever. right? That's
Yeah.
more so. So this last question, and we'll end on this one, and it'll tie into what I wanted to ask you too, which I ask all of our alums, of course, is what advice do you have for our journalism students, right, to go from here to there? And of course, I have to take this opportunity to look at your yearbook. So you of course, right, you were the editor, one of our Evergreen, right, which was our literary magazine, and also weren't you involved in Forward in the actual yearbook too, right? So here you
This
are.
goes way back.
I know. So you printed were you responsible for the upside down photograph?
Nope.
No. And there you are in the corner with that very fashionable 90s turtleneck under the
roll neck, turtleneck.
Yeah, very, very great. And your yearbook page, of course, is literary, obviously. So for our viewers, you haven't changed a bit, Andrea.
What a nice thing to say.
Yeah, and all of these great literary quotes, right? And so here, question I have, and then we'll end on a more serious one, but you said at Greenhills, after 6 years, I love chocolate, I hate the sight of blood, and I'm left-handed, which is what you wrote in your application essay on the way in as a 6th grader. And then you say, in every other way I've grown. So I have to ask, do you still, love chocolate, hate the sight of blood, and still left-handed?
100%. And I would say those things really still define me. Honestly, they really do. They've shaped a lot of different parts of my life. So that's very funny. Some of them are, facts that won't change, right? Like being left-handed. But the other two, I have not made any progress on. I still hate blood, and I still love candy. In fact, I always have some within arm's reach. Just to put my money where my mouth is. Like, emergency candy.
Beautiful.
It sits on my desk. So some things don't change, but many things have changed.
That's great. Well, the serious question is, how do you get from there, Andrea, editor of the yearbook? Well, that's a start, right? And then to where you are now.
So
advice.
My advice is actually, I didn't know at all in middle school or high school that this is what I wanted to do. So, and in fact, at Brown, I studied psychology. I didn't even take journalism classes or work on the paper. What I find is that for me, all the qualities that really mattered for this job were, one, being curious, which is really the most important thing for any kid and any student to be, and two, loving to read. I think if you're a big, voracious reader of all different kinds of things, including just fiction, even if you don't love reading the news or magazines or whatever, it really helps when you later want to become either a writer or an editor, for having all of this frame of reference for the way people can use words and the power of words. But for me, the curiosity was the biggest part of it. It was really, my job every week, I get to sit down and say, what are the most interesting stories? Like, what would I want to know about them? Who should we talk to? And to me, that never gets old. And I think if you have a curious mind and you want to know about the world and you want to learn about it in a way that is active instead of passive, right? So also reading the news is incredibly important, but it is a different experience than working in it. If those are two things, curiosity and love of reading, that apply to you, you're already on the path. Of course, now there are a lot more opportunities to study journalism, like you guys already have. That wasn't really a big part of any curriculum when I was younger. And now, there are ways to get experience and a lot of ways to actually try hands-on what the job would be like. And those are all really great. But if you come to it late, as I did, it's still something, if you've set yourself up for a lifetime love of reading and writing, it's still something that you can get to, as opposed to many of my friends and colleagues and my husband, who started planning for their career in late high school and all through college and all of that. Journalism is really something that if you're a great writer and a big reader, you can take to at whatever point you want to. And the fact that there are kids who are already interested in asking these really great, thoughtful, and well-researched questions makes me think we're going to have a lot of you in the mix in the future.
Great. Andrea, thanks so much for joining us today.
It was a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Please come back and visit.
Absolutely.
Okay, bye.